Good evening. Welcome to The Pressure Point. I'm your host, Barbara Anderson, and tonight we celebrate the Diamond Jubilee of the Vancouver School of Theology with our special guests, the Reverend Lynne McNaughton, Assistant Priest at Christ Church Cathedral, who is a recent graduate of the Vancouver School of Theology, and Reverend Gerald Hobbs, who is a Professor of Church History at the Vancouver School of Theology. Welcome to The Pressure Point, both of you.
Thank you.
Well, Vancouver School of Theology is celebrating 60 years of being in existence, but that's not exactly accurate. I mean, there is some history before that, and I wonder if you might take us back to that time, Gerald, when the school came into existence.
Yes, we know that from the very days that British Columbia began as a colony, in the churches there was an interest in training up clergy for the churches here who could take a part in leading the church both in the life of the churches and in the mission work of the church here. The first university charter, in fact, in British Columbia was given to the Methodists back in the 1880s, and Columbian College, which was founded in 1891 as a Methodist college, actually antedates the University of British Columbia by about 20 years.
On the same site?
No, in those days the theological schools, as they began, Columbian College already in 1891, the Presbyterians with Westminster Hall, the Anglicans with both Latimer Hall and St. Mark's Hall, both in that period just before the First World War. All of these were either in New Westminster or in the west, what's the present west end of the city of Vancouver.
Well, is that right? So those locations are no longer there, though. Are there buildings there?
I think one or two of the old buildings may still be there, though some of them have disappeared. The thing is that the province was a long time settling a provincial university and even determining the site. The actual settling on the Point Grey site where the University of British Columbia is now located took place at the end of the First World War, and it's at that point that the Anglican, the Presbyterian, the Methodist churches, and the Congregationalists begin to think in terms of moving their colleges out there onto the new university campus.
That's interesting. So they moved out there, and of course the Methodists, Presbyterians, and Congregationalists formed the basis of union and became the United Church of Canada in 1925. And
that's right. So this, we tend to think, ecumenical endeavors is something that really belongs to our generation, but in fact, of course, that's been a preoccupation of the Christian churches throughout the 20th century, and there were in fact actually conversations going on with the Anglicans as well in that period around the First World War and immediately following about ways in which they could work together. After all, we're talking about very small little colleges that realized they needed to work together and cooperate in order to provide the kind of training for ordained ministry that they needed to do.
And I'm sure in order to survive in some
Yes,
respect.
of course.
Now, so we're talking about 1927, the United Church of Canada is a newly formed body, and it needs a theological college, and the Anglican Church has one as well, or begins to see the need for expanding.
Yeah, the Anglicans in fact have two that are coming together to form one college on the university campus, the Anglican Theological College, and as you say, the three denominations have come together to make the United Church of Canada, and they create the Union College of British Columbia, so that in the spring of 1927, cornerstones are laid for both the Anglican Theological College and the Union College of British Columbia, very close to one another on the fledgling campus of the new University of British Columbia. And it's that anniversary, that 60 years of those buildings on the university campus, that the Vancouver School of Theology is celebrating this year.
So it's those two buildings which are still presently used.
That's right. Much expanded from what they were then, but still presently in use.
that were the cornerstones were laid in 1927.
That's right.
Interesting. Well, what are some of the important events that happened in those intervening years since 1927 and now?
Well, as we think back, of course, in Canadian history, the history of British Columbia and the history of Canada are a part of the life of the Christian church in the intervening years, and all the events of our common life had their impact on those colleges. Of course, within 3 years, 2 years in fact, of those cornerstones comes the crash of 1929, and British Columbia struggles throughout the 30s through the very difficult Depression years, and those small colleges had to face difficulty of hard times, the very, very difficult task of raising enough funds to pay the salaries of faculty and support the students in the school, expanding facilities almost impossible because of the financial crises of the churches. Then, of course, we have the coming of the Second World War and the impact that has. Reading recently in the history of one of the colleges, I note that for a while during the Second World War, when the student population was down because so many young men were overseas in the armed forces, that for a while the Royal Canadian Air Force used part of one of the college buildings, and I think even a part of one of the buildings was turned into a Department of National Defense hospital. Really interesting little vignettes in the past. So both the Depression and the war profoundly shaped those, profoundly shaped the life of those colleges, and of course the great Canadian boom that takes place after the Second World War and the tremendous growth of the churches as a part of that in the 1950s is also reflected in the way the colleges grew and developed and were able to do the kind of expansion of their building facilities, the adding of library facilities, and the building of the very, very beautiful Anglican Chapel of the Epiphany, the expansion of the residences, and so on.
When was that chapel built?
The Chapel of the Epiphany is early 60s. And in some respects, I think that is the last addition to the buildings that we presently have, and I think an absolutely striking one.
It is very beautiful. When now did the merger take place that the Union College and the Anglican Theological College began to see, well, we're very close to each other, we're doing some of the same work, why not come together? When did that happen and how did it happen?
Yes, in a way they were working together for many years. They shared classes very often. Persons in our audience who were trained in ATC or Union College in those years will remember the fact that they took some of their classes in one college and some in the other. But it took I think it was the crisis of the churches in the 60s and the late 60s which brought the colleges to realize that if they really wanted to serve the Christian church and enable the Christian church and its ministry to serve the cause of the mission of God in Canada and in the world in the 70s and 80s, they were going to have to take some further steps towards union, that they drew up joint committees in the late 60s, and when they had once decided that the future lay in bringing the two colleges into a complete union, there was an implementation committee set up in 1970, and that was the committee that resulted in 1971 the creation of the Vancouver School of Theology. A number of those people who were associated with that are still living today and are some of the outstanding leaders of the church in this province, people like Archbishop Gower, Archdeacon Watney, Reg Wilson, who was on the faculty of Union College, and others like that.
So just as recent as 1971.
Yes, the Vancouver School of Theology as a unified school dates from 1971.
Isn't that interesting? And Lynn, you're a recent graduate of the Vancouver School of Theology. When did you graduate?
Graduated in the spring of 1986. So a year and a half ago.
And what kind of a program did you take there?
I took the Masters of Divinity program, which is the degree for preparing one for ordained ministry. I took a 4-year program there. It can be done in 3 years. I had a year-long internship in the middle of that at Christchurch Cathedral, in fact, and then went back for my final year after.
Why did you choose the Vancouver School of Theology?
Several reasons. I'm an Albertan at heart still, and so it was the closest of all of the Anglican schools. And a couple of my mentors in Alberta, one was a graduate from ATC, so always spoke of his training being in Vancouver, and and the chaplain at University of Alberta, when I was really sorting out my call, was a graduate of VST.
So came
And
highly recommended
yes.
from other recent graduates.
Yes.
Who think fondly of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just ask this question, kind of a hypothetical question. If some of those people who laid the cornerstones for those first buildings were to come back today, what changes would they notice at the Vancouver School of Theology?
Lots.
Yes.
Probably the most striking thing right away would be that over half of the students now are women, and 60
sure.
years ago it would have been young single males.
Mm-hmm. That's a big change, isn't it?
That is really that has brought about. I think it's not. We often use the term revolution loosely, but I think that there's been a revolutionary change in the churches, a very, very positive change, but certainly profound, and that would certainly be noticeable. I mean, when I think the first woman who studied and graduated from the Anglican Theological College back in the Depression years was Hilda Hellaby, who had an outstanding career of ministry in both in the downtown east side of Vancouver and then in the Yukon, and who just died 2-3 years ago. But she was never ordained. The possibilities for women for ministry simply did not exist. A little longer, of course, the United Church of Canada has been ordaining women for, I think, 50 years now.
She'd been a deaconess then?
She was a deaconess and remained a deaconess to the end of her life. So that's certainly a dramatic and exciting change. The other one that I would notice would be that so many of our students now are second career people. There's a good number of your classmates would have been people who had.
I was one of the youngest in my class. The average age would have been closer to 40.
Well, that changes the whole concept
Yes.
of ministry, or how you teach, education for ministry, doesn't it?
In a really remarkable way. I had a chance about 2 years ago to realize what that does when I was back teaching for a year in a theological school in France, where all the theological students came directly out of high school into the theological school. And I was just struck with how enriching it is to have students in the classroom who have such a wide wealth of life experience that comes into the mix of doing theology, which after all means reflecting on the meaning of our faith experience. Well, I mean, there's no substitute for life experience.
That's right.
You know?
No substitute for that, no.
Yes.
That's interesting. What about in terms of the courses and programs that have been laid out? Have those in any way changed over the years as the school has moved in the direction it has?
Oh, certainly. One is always struck by how much continuity there is, that we haven't invented everything in our own generation as we so often like to think we have, but still there have been important developments. Field education, for example, that you were mentioning earlier, Lynn, at Christ Church Cathedral, that's a major part of theological education now, having people go out as a part of their training. Well, what for example, at Christ Church Cathedral, you were actually involved?
I mean, part of it was even earlier than that. In my second year, I was already out doing hospital ministry, and found that very helpful to have that experience and then come back to do some of my training. But my field experience involved being in a parish setting for considerable length of time with supervision, preaching, doing pastoral work, doing some of the administration.
So is there more emphasis now on the practical experience of ministry and more opportunity to practice the gifts and the talents for ministry that one has, as opposed to, say,
There's
30, 40 years ago?
That's right. There's more emphasis, but also an emphasis in a particular kind of way. The emphasis today would be upon integration of the two. I mean, people always practiced ministry. They trained for professional ministry, and then they went out and did it. But today we try to emphasize bringing one's understanding about faith, one's theology, one's understanding about the tradition, about the sources of our faith in Scripture, into constant and living dialogue with, an ongoing dialogue with one's experience in the church, and one's experience as a human being living in the world, because in the final analysis, the theological school, like the church, doesn't exist for the sake of the church, but for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what it's really all about. And I wonder if we can, from that, go to the mandate of the Vancouver School of Theology. Is it, shall we say, almost exclusively for the education of ordered ministry students, or are you expanding that, or has that been expanded?
There would have been, what, in your class?
3 or 4 people who were not headed towards ordained ministry. Several people who will be commissioned ministers in the United Church, lay people who were taking, now I've forgotten the name of it, not an MDiv.
The MTS, Master of Theological Studies. Yes.
So that's another program that one can take.
That's a degree.
That does not lead to being ordained.
To being ordained. That's a degree program, and I'm struck by the fact that this year, for example, I think a larger number or larger percentage of the entering class than ever before. So that's one very real change in a way too that has happened, that there are people who do theological studies seriously and who do not go out to be ordained ministry, though the preparation of people for ordained ministry in the church will always be the number one task of the theological school. But also the development of programs for the laity, providing of resources for Christians for reflecting on the meaning of their faith simply in the context of occasional courses, what we would call continuing education, that's available both for clergy
and for laity.
Yeah.
So the people who take the course, the MTS program, Master of Theological Studies, would they be looking towards working in the church setting as a lay minister, perhaps, or a staff associate?
That could be. I can think of one student, for example, in this year's entering class, who is looking at a ministry of leadership in worship and in music, and in educating, being an educator to help congregations work at learning about worship and at about music. So that, for example, would be an illustration of what a person who is in the MTS program might do. Someone else might be there concentrating in counseling. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of different ways that one can approach that. What are some of the special programs that the Vancouver School of Theology has offered or is offering now to help people who maybe don't want to enter the ordered ministry, or who want a special kind of involvement in the school, who may live out in the outlying areas, may not be able to come in and take courses? I'm thinking of some of the people who just can't get into the school and take the courses there. What would some of the special programs be that you'd have? Knowledge Network,
that's your baby.
Yes. Well, all of us, I guess, at the school are involved in it to some extent. Yes, the whole media revolution with the exponential growth of the electronic media and the possibilities that offers through, for example, cable television, that provides the possibility of locally based television. The presence of video recorders now in, I don't know what the percentage is, but probably a large number of homes in the community.
Homes, I think.
That's right, and in the schools and in churches, means that one of the things we're doing at the school is moving into the area of producing video resources for theological education, both for reaching out to clergy who are after all, we in British Columbia live in a region in the whole Northwest, because we also serve Alberta and Washington State and so on. We live in an area where people are relatively sparsely settled, and these possibilities extend the possibilities of ministry of the school and the possibilities of its service in exciting new ways.
So this and the Knowledge Network program you referred to is a series that you've produced now every year for a number of years, is that right?
That's right, for the Provincial Education Network, yes.
Even in Christchurch Cathedral, which is within 15 minutes of VST, the congregation has used all of the Knowledge Network programs because it allows people to meet in homes, to turn off the tape and have discussion groups, and doesn't require the leadership of clergy or someone who's theologically trained. It's very good for congregations that way.
What about other programs, shall we say, for Native people that may be provided along those lines?
That's an exciting new development that we are just on the edge of. One of the things that has struck me now I'm going into my 11th year of teaching here, has been that we have had almost no students from the very, very numerous Christian Native communities here in the coast and in the interior. And it's clear now to me why. Because the Native communities of the coast and of BC, of this region in general, have been reflecting on the special needs that exist for the ways that one can train a ministry to serve in these communities. And we have been invited at the school to become a part of a consortium along with the Anglican Diocese of Caledonia, which has had a program in existence for some years, and the coastal group of the United Church of Canada. We are now part of a consortium that is working at developing a special degree program for training persons for ministry in Native settings. And that's going to be, by and large, an extension program. It's very exciting, it's very new. We really are only beginning to struggle with what all of that is about, because it's going to take us into, we're all so locked into the model of coming into a classroom and sitting there and in front of the professor, that we really are not altogether clear yet what it's going to mean, but it is quite exciting.
So now the education is going out into the Native communities, and they're having the opportunity to have some input back into the education.
That's right, and they will come in from time to time for short periods in the school, but primarily the education will take place within the communities themselves.
Now, we should get on to say something, talk about the vision of what is in the future for the Vancouver School of Theology. Before we do, just a little bit of history. I think we might have left out a couple of other denominations have joined the Vancouver School of Theology since that merger, have they?
Yes, the Presbyterian Church in British Columbia has had an institution on the university campus, St. Andrew's Hall, for a number of years. And has been now for a few years an associate member of the Vancouver School of Theology, and we rejoice in that. We have students in the school from what must be a dozen denominations,
Yes.
eh?
United Methodist from the States, which
That's
is
right.
exciting to have some people from another country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So there's quite a spectrum of students that are coming in.
Yes, that's right. And let me add, too, that we're also affiliated with Regent College, which is another theological school on the university campus whose origins go back 20 years or so now. And so that offers a possibility of enrichments for students, too. Students are allowed to take courses from each of the schools, can take courses in the other school.
Oh, that's interesting. So with all this kind of exciting new work and programs going on at the Vancouver School of Theology, what does it look like in the future? What kind of vision does the school have for where it'll go, and how will it accommodate all of these challenges that it presently is facing?
A good question. A good question, Barbara. Sometimes one stops and says, can we really handle all this? But there's a lot of energy and a lot of willingness and a lot of encouragement from our graduates, people like Lynne and others who say to us, carry on, and there are so many new things you can be involved in, don't stop. I think one of the really exciting things that's part of a larger vision these days is the opening up increasingly of the school to being a resource for ordinary folk in the pews of our congregations. Our librarian, Elizabeth Hart, has been part of developing a policy whereby the VST library is now accessible to any member of a congregation who wishes to obtain a card. Didn't you say you were?
well, I had several people come to me recently with application forms, people from my congregation who want to be part of the library and
That's
can borrow.
really exciting.
It really
because that's
is,
a
yeah.
tremendous resource that is now available to lay people, wow, the exciting possibilities for education just that people can do now in their own home is just
Yes.
tremendous.
That's
Yes.
true. And of course, at the same time, that puts constraints upon us. One of the things we're discovering is that with these possibilities that are before us, we're once more bursting at the seams. Many of our library books are in storage because we have no longer room on the shelves of the library for them. We produce electronic media, television programs that our students can't watch in the library because we've no center for them to be able to do that. So one of the immediate things that lies before us now is the urgent necessity of expanding our facilities to allow the possibility of these new programs and maintaining the kind of work we're doing in continuing education with congregations and so on.
So there's an expansion program going on right now?
That's right.
For the library and for other parts of the school as well?
Yes, there'll be various parts of it. The most immediate need is the development of the former ATC building, which we call now the Chancellor Building, where the library is located, and the expansion of those facilities. That's a campaign that's currently underway, and the school is in the process of calling upon the peoples of the churches of British Columbia to respond, as they have so often and so generously in the past, to help us be able to serve them better.
And certainly a worthy cause, given that it's now open to congregations, and this is an opportunity to help out and to help meet that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Which, now, just talking about the Diamond Jubilee celebrations themselves, are there any special events taking place for those in coming weeks, Gerald?
In the spring, Barbara, the Women's Auxiliary celebrated the actual 60th anniversary of the laying of the cornerstone.
Mm-hmm.
But on 3 successive Wednesday nights here in the month of October, we're going to have a series of Diamond Jubilee lectures. The first one, October 7th, will be by the English church historian, Professor Owen Chadwick of Cambridge. The second by Professor Keith Clifford of the UBC Religious Studies Department. And on the last night, October 21st, the principal, Arthur Van Cedars, will give us his sense of vision for the school for tomorrow and the direction that he wants the school to go in the upcoming years.
Are these open to the public?
These are open to the public, and we hope to see a lot of them there.
Great. Well, it's been a great pleasure talking to both of you about the Vancouver School of Theology, and I think it might be a good time to invite our viewers to drop by the school and to have a look at the buildings, and not only that, but to even take part in some of the programs, perhaps. And the address of that is what, 6,000?
6,000 Iona Drive.
And that's on the UBC campus?
On the UBC campus, you come in off 4th Avenue, which becomes Chancellor Boulevard.
Well, thanks very much for sharing that with us, both of you, Gerald and Lynn. It's great to have you on The Pressure Point. And thank you for joining us on The Pressure Point. Good evening, and God bless.